Continuing on the drawing foundations, this one is an absolute classic. Drawing the sphere, this is a great exercise, and if you've ever been in an art class or taking a drawing class, anything like that, this is usually one of the first exercises that you'll practice, and it's surprisingly challenging if you're unfamiliar with your medium or with drawing in general. So this is a great printout. You can print this. I'll put that in the description so that you can download it and use this image if you want to print this out. And I like that it's got these annotations. It's got everything labeled here. So just to kind of go through it, we've got our highlight here. That's the brightest point. Obviously this is the lighter side. And then we've got, some of the shadow. They're calling this core shadow. This is also referred to as the Terminator line. This is like the definitive part of the shadow where you start to get this kind of shape out of it. And then you've got reflected light down here. So this is light coming from the surroundings, which is reflected back onto the surface. And then you've got the cast shadow. So the cast shadow is actually going to create some contrast, and it's going to help to create this contour here. So without this cast shadow, this reflected light wouldn't be quite so visible. So this is important for creating depth and creating a sense of space, really regardless of what you are working with. In portraiture, you see this all the time, and this is just a very simple breakdown. I mean, I like this for the sake of simplifying, getting back to the core, even though, I've painted many portraits, drawn many portraits, whatever. Coming back to this is a good reminder because it just shows, how simple some of these concepts are, although simple doesn't mean easy to execute. I'm going to have toned paper here, so if you didn't see the previous demo, I recommend you check that out. I talk about the materials that I'm using, toning the paper, everything like that. It's just black Conte, that's it. We're keeping it nice and simple. I kind of already see the sphere here. So this is something funny that happens sometimes with the Conte. You kind of get some strange shapes that form in the paper when you tone it. So sometimes it's fun to take advantage of that. But anyways, I don't think it's worth drawing it as big as I've got it printed out. You can see this is pretty big, so I'm going to go a little bit smaller to make it more manageable. And starting out, I'm going very delicate. I'm just trying to give myself some indications, some markers here, in order to understand the shape, in order to understand what's really going on. Is where are my outer limits? That's the question. I'm always trying to really place the portrait and get the entire big shape in place before I start doing anything, because if you try to just, let's say, you might be tempted to just jump in here and start knocking out the highlight, and that can be fun and good, but it doesn't mean that that's a solid approach, because usually what's going to happen, like in portraiture, if you immediately jump to a detail, you're going to run into very, very big problems. You'll probably end up completely changing the entire size and proportion multiple times, and that is just a nightmare. It's a whole lot of time doing a whole lot of nothing. So if you give yourself a pretty solid outline, or I guess a constraint, that's what I'm thinking about. You have your limits, then you're not going to go beyond that. You're not going to shrink it, you're not going to make it bigger. And then you can actually work on these proportions effectively and figure out what the problem is. Because if you're going into the details, you're going to be bouncing all around, you're going to be making it bigger, smaller, everything's going to be a mess. So give yourself some little markers here. This is what we call a shape. So the shape is just the outline of this sort of circle once we add some volume and some depth to it, then we have the form, which is a sphere. So give yourself a little bit of a basis to work with, and like I said, those are delicate marks, so those are not going to be permanent. That way you're not fighting against the paper or fighting against the material here in order to actually move forward with your drawing. Then I'm just going to start here by erasing, creating some of this light. Not quite happy with the kneaded eraser. I don't know what's going on with the shape here. I need to mold it a little bit. But I'm just kind of drawing out the shape of the light here. So I'll go soft to make sure I'm actually getting what I want out of this. You see these little marks. That's what's bothering me. Those are kind of annoying. That's really just from the shape of the eraser and how I was going on top there. For a bigger size work, like a portrait, probably wouldn't be having that problem. But in any case, if you run into that where you have this really annoying blending going on or some annoying marks, toilet paper is usually the answer. So that will help to just smooth it out, blend together these different parts. And I can even use this to start removing some of the darkness down here. And we're starting to get a sphere a little bit. So I guess some words of wisdom here. As you've kind of seen perhaps, I'm not doing anything crazy. I'm really not. I mean, I'm taking a pretty slow, subtle approach and just getting these key markers in place. So you see I started out with a little bit of an outline, then I worked around, gave myself some light. So I'm starting to give myself a little bit of shadow here, and that's really all it takes. I mean, taking the approach of not destroying your surface is usually a good idea, especially with the Conte. If you're on soft paper in particular, you can get into trouble really quick if you make hard marks. So it's one of my students coined a new phrase. I like it. We're gonna use it. If you're digging into the paper and you're making really hard marks, drawing these hard lines, you are known as a hammer hand. So from now on, if you do that, I'm going to call you hammer hands. So don't do that. Now we're getting some of this cast shadow. I think maybe their cast shadow is actually just a little bit too dark. So I'm going to play around here, see what makes sense. But you're going to have some of the form within the cast shadow as well. You can use your finger to blend as well. That will be perhaps a more delicate approach compared to the toilet paper. The toilet paper is usually going to be kind of harsh when it comes to blending and removing the Conte. So if you want a more delicate approach, sometimes the finger can do a better job. So I'm refining the shape here as I go, trying to make it a better sphere, more round. And at this point, it would be a good idea to kind of check back to some of these overall things that are going on. For example, if you're doing this alongside me here, look back at your big shape. Look back at the big shape before you really commit too much into what you have. Check back, make sure some of these key indicators are making sense, like the shape of the shadow that's coming along the sphere, maybe the shape of your cast shadow. It's not necessarily as important right now, but compare the shape that you're getting to your reference and just make sure you're checking back in these big picture ideas. So again, I can soften some things up. I can use my handy toilet paper here, and I'll blend out some of this shadow. That way I'm getting a nice soft blending. And then I'll start to get a little bit more detailed here. I like how this is coming along. So I'm gonna go with my highlight, my bright highlight right here. I'm gonna push it just a little bit further actually. So I'm gonna go right there. I think that feels more natural in a way. And then we're gonna give just a little bit of a blending right around the highlight to give it a little bit of glow. And you can think about this also as sort of concentric circles when it comes to your shading or blending, and especially when you get into some portraits or bigger things. You kind of want to think about where you're at. If you're very close to the light source, you know, you need more light. So that's pretty straightforward. If you're closer to the shadows or further away from the light, you need less light. So as far as the values go, you're going to, you know, push your range one way or another. So it's not necessarily the case that you're going to be using all of your values all the time. It's more like in a particular area, you're going to use more values. Like on the light side, you'll use more of your 1 through 5 values, let's say, and on the shadow side, you'll use more of the 5 through 10. And even then, you know, your most extreme values, your 1 and your 10 values, are going to be pretty rare. So it doesn't really require that you use those in order to create depth, to create volume. I mean, you can see like this sphere is coming along, and I still haven't used at least, I'd say, 30% of my values. I could have used more light and more darkness here. I'm not saying I should. I'm saying that you just have to get, you know, the core, the foundation. What is the big structure doing? And then if you get that, you'll pretty much get the form. You'll get something very compelling. You don't need to go super high contrast to get a very good sense of form. So you see in this image, I actually like this. They've got a little bit of a background, so I'm also gonna do a little bit, just a little bit with that. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of light here. This is just gonna help to offer the contour on the shadow side, so it's not just darkness. And that's something you'll find, that's actually a very common theme in painting. You usually want to have kind of a mismatch or like a flip-flop. So in the area where you have your shadows, over here on the shadow side, you generally want the background to be lighter than those shadows. And in the area where you have your light, you generally want for the background to be darker than that light. And the reason for that is that it will help to illuminate your subject and create the sort of outline or structure, and it allows the viewer to actually see what's going on. So instead of just leaving everything mid-tone, for example, you're going to actually intentionally change the values that are around. Because, I mean, like over here, if I didn't lighten this up, then my shadow would be blending into the background too much, and we wouldn't get this nice contour that we have. So you just have to be aware that, you know, you can let some things blend into the shadows, sure, but most of the time you actually want them to have some kind of separation. It doesn't need to be drastic, but you want some kind of separation. That way you can be sure that you're actually defining everything, right? You're not just hiding in the shadows, you're actually doing it. So this is coming along pretty nice, I think. If you're looking for some extra practice, if you want to practice some more, what I would recommend is actually doing another one of these studies. You could actually do many of these. There's some other geometric shapes as well. I haven't decided if I'll do more, because I think the sphere is really the best practice. It's the most similar to portraiture. But if you're looking to do another study and you just want to practice, what I would recommend is doing another study of the sphere like this, and practice your technique. So what you could do is you could practice with some hatching and cross hatching if you want. Don't go, you know, very hard into the paper. If you watch the drawing techniques video, I talk about how to do the hatching and cross hatching. So if you haven't seen that, I recommend you watch it. That's a good one when it comes to techniques. And it could give you another approach to drawing as well, so you're not just doing everything with one mindset. So I think that'd be good practice. And you can make multiple of these. I mean, are you ever going to make the perfect sphere? I don't think so. So you might as well practice, make multiple, and see if you can get better as you go along. And when it comes to technique, like right here, you know, I'm doing the same thing as what I talked about in the drawing techniques video. I'm actually making individual marks. I know it probably looks like I'm like scratching and repeatedly on the surface making marks, but what I'm actually doing is I'm just going in one direction. So I'm basically hatching here. If I'm moving my hand a lot, it doesn't really matter. I'm still going softly, and I'm making a hatching mark. So like right here, I'm only pressing into the paper on the downward movement. I'm not pressing into the paper on the way up. And I can go over this with my toilet paper, soften it, blend back into the sphere just a little bit to help create a little bit of volume and a little bit of blending. And then you see I'm going back over this so that way I can redefine it, make sure it's making sense. I'll do the same thing up here. I'm going to lighten up some of this side a little bit more. Starting to get some volume here. So this is the point of the sandpaper, the toilet paper. And when you do this with a drawing, with a portrait drawing, it can really help to create some liveliness because you're basically dissolving the edge. It might be there more subtly, so if you do it properly, you can still keep a very subtle edge. But it's just helping to create a sort of sense of atmosphere because you are no longer just sharp with your definition around the edge. It's helping to kind of break it up, which can be very satisfying. I would actually argue that that's kind of essential if you want to create a lively quality. If you want the object to feel real, then you really do have to do that in some areas. Not everywhere, but just in some crucial parts, it helps to really make it feel like it's there because you're essentially creating this kind of atmospheric quality, right? It's like atmospheric perspective. Things that are further away are going to be less clear, and also playing on that, things that are not important, things that are not in focus are also going to be less clear. So although it may be somewhat clear in reality, you can purposely make it less clear in order to give the viewer something more. So you're kind of tricking the viewer's eye. You're making them think that it's not important, or rather forcing that. They don't even think about it consciously. So it's the same thing as like right here. I could sharpen up this little edge a little bit because this is close to our highlight. Make the highlight nice and pretty. And right here, maybe we want things to be more clear. But in some other areas, like right over here, where we're in a transition, you don't want it to be super crisp and sharp. You want it to be a little bit more subtle. I'm going to purposely create a little bit of separation. I don't want the shadow to be as dark as what they're showing though. I want it to kind of fade out more softly. Right here, this is a tricky spot. This would be a really good time for switching to the Conte pencil. If you guys are unaware, they do the same brand, Conte of Paris. They also make pencils as well as crayons. So when drawing portraits, it's usually nice to kind of draw with the crayon and then switch to the pencil in the late stages just for the details. I suppose you could also sand your crayon down to a finer point. So if you're looking for details, sometimes that's the way to go. Seems I'm running out of time here, so just to kind of finish this off, making myself a little pirate map so it feels more like a complete drawing. Just going around the edges here, adding just a little bit of darkness around the edges. More touches here. I think it can stand to go a little bit lighter up here. I'd like to keep going. That's too much fun, but I gotta go. So I hope you had a good time with this. If you drew the sphere, let me know how it went. Send me a photo on Instagram if you want. And like I said, if you're looking for more practice, practice more with the sphere. You can draw a lot of spheres, and you'll still never make it too good. So feel free to try out some other techniques as well. Could be worthwhile to practice with hatching, for example. I think that could be really good practice. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.